So welcome everyone to the JB Media Digital Drop-In. I'm so glad to have you here as usual. And today I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have with our special guest, Adam Stoker. And our conversation today, I think, is going to be really interesting. And I'm especially excited to hear from someone else that I know is doing amazing work in destination marketing, to share kind of what they're learning and seeing. Because as you can see from the poll that we're running, there's lots of things changing in the world, and therefore it's really pushing all of us to really get on top of our game right now with our marketing, to be prepared, to know what we're planning. And especially now that we're halfway through the year, it's a really good time to stop for a minute, take a breath, and evaluate what are you going to do with the next 6 months. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Benoit, and I'm the co-founder and lead instructor of the JB Media Institute. We host these webinars every month on the first Wednesday. I'm also the co-founder and co-producer of the DIY Tourism Marketing Conference, which will be happening here in Asheville on November 11th and 12th of this year. So if you're interested in having 2 days to dig into real skill building, about all forms of digital marketing. So we cover everything related to SEO, social media, digital advertising. Our event is basically kind of a 2-day deep dive where we come together and talk about different strategies, different platforms, different tools, and different trends. And we bring in experts from around the country to talk about how you can actually apply some of the trends and tools and strategies that you'll learn about. So very actionable. And we love to have people come and meet up with us here every fall. So feel free, when you get a copy of the slide deck, to check that information out on our website, DIYtourismmarketing.com. Also, I've included for you more information about our free webinars. Next month on July 10th, we're going to skip the week of the holiday, but we'll have graphic designer Krista Gargano with us to do another Canva tips and updates training. Her webinar in 2023 was our biggest one. So we had lots of people join us to sort of get hands-on support around Canva. Also, I've been mentioning every month that I am running something called the Demystifying AI Ethics Virtual Leadership Roundtable. So once a month, I'm bringing people together for an hour during lunch on the East Side and in the morning on the West Coast. And basically, we are just talking about different ethical questions around artificial intelligence. So our topic for this month is diversity, equity, and accessibility. It'll be on June 19th. It is only $10 to join us for that event. But if you would like to come for free, just email me, which is also my information's at the end of the slide deck. And I'm glad to give you a pass to come to at least one of our roundtables. And then you can always find out more about what I am teaching and doing by going and checking out our online classroom and our website. But like I said, what I'm really excited about today is actually hearing from Adam Stoker, who is one member of the leadership team over at Relic Agency and also the host of the Destination Marketing Podcast. And I am so glad that you are here today, Adam, to share your insights. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. And a lot of the work that you're doing to educate people, especially with the DIY work that allows people to build their own skills and increase their education themselves, I think you're doing great work, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
So really what we're going to do, just so everyone is aware, and welcome to the folks who are continuing to join us. If you see the poll, feel free to answer the poll and also to introduce yourself in the chat. But for those of you who are new to how our webinars run, as we go along, there is a Q&A feature on Zoom. You can pop all of your questions in there. I'll be monitoring that. I'll also be watching the chat though. So if for any reason you can't get into the Q&A, feel free to just drop questions in the chat and I'll make sure that we answer those. And as we go through today, this is just going to be a conversation between Adam and I. And what I really want to give all of you the opportunity to do is really dig in and find out how you can apply what he's talking about, since we have his expertise in the room this afternoon. So my first question, which is kind of a basic one, and I know we have just maybe a couple people that are sort of new to the idea of owned media. They're not sure if they're doing it or not. So how do you define owned media? And I'm especially curious when we're talking about destination marketing and tourism marketing, Does owned media mean the same thing in that industry as it does in other industries, or has it got a unique perspective?
Yeah, and this is the topic that I enjoy speaking about more than anything else. It's my passion, and so if at any point, Sarah, I'm going on too long or getting too excited, just stop me and slow me down. But I want to frame this correctly because I could just define owned media, but I think it's important to talk about why I even care about it, if that's okay, to just get started. And that's the fact that most of us in our tourism destinations, if you were to look at our budgets, what we have is some sort of an annual campaign. Those with a larger budget might have a couple of different annual campaigns. So we come up with our creative message, which is usually going to include a headline that we all agree on, some pretty pictures that represent the destination correctly, and then a media plan to accompany that creative campaign. How are we going to distribute this message? And when I look at that, there's only two real variables there that allow us to have success or failure. The first variable is budget, because if every destination is doing the same, creative campaign, I don't mean the same campaign, but the same process of developing an annual campaign and then leveraging a media buy to distribute that campaign. Budget is the variability that allows us to get the message in front of more people. The other variable is creative, because if our campaign is more attention getting, and I think there's been some really great examples of that. I always love the Nebraska "It's Not for Everyone" campaign. I just think it's such a fun headline. It's really engaging, and I think their ability to get reach was increased a lot by having such a creative campaign. But if the only two real variables in the traditional method of destination marketing are budget and creative, what it means is that if you're a smaller destination, it's very unlikely that if you have a smaller budget, you're going to be able to employ the team that's the most creative. And of course, there's agency partners and things like that. But the reality is you're put in a little bit of a losing battle as a smaller destination by trying to compete with your larger destinations, your larger competitors, following the same essentially framework that they're using. And so, yes, you may come up with a really big campaign that wins a certain year, but then even if you have a great campaign, you have to have the budget to get in front of more people than your competitors. And so owned media, the way I look at it, there's four different types of media. There's paid media, which I just kind of talked about. That's the traditional method to distribute these campaigns. There's earned media, is where you actually get other people to talk about your destination through public relations efforts in most cases. There's shared media, which is your social media channels, and this is where you own the content, but the platform owns the channel. And then there's owned media, where you have full control of that media. And I want to be clear too that owned media is not just important on its own. It's a means to an end, because the end is you're trying to build an audience that you have direct contact, influence, and control over. And so we're not building owned media just because it's one of the four uh, uh, legs of the stool of the peso model, right? That it also gives us the ability to build a community, a modern community. And the reason I say a modern community is because we used to look at communities as geographical based, but with the way technology has kind of facilitated, anybody can be close. I mean, we're all over the country right here on this call. Modern communities are interest based. And we are all part of a community here because we share an interest in destination marketing. That, in my mind, is a modern community. And I believe that through owned media, through and a few examples of owned media that I'll give you. I obviously run a podcast, and so my podcast is owned media that we create. I think this webinar series that you do, that's owned media, the JB Media Institute puts on. And so, like, there's a lot of different types of owned media. Your blog, your email content is owned media. I believe that your website may be the most underutilized owned media asset that anybody has. I know we'll talk about that today. And then, major destinations can even create like streaming series, YouTube series. And we may talk about a few of those today, but I would say anything that you have full control over is an owned media asset. And I'll give you an example of one that's not. So Yellowstone has had an incredible impact on the state of Montana, right? The TV show. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's incredible. But that is not owned by the destination. That somebody else owns it, and it features the destination. My question is, why, as destinations, do we need to wait for somebody that has that money, power, and influence to create something like that? Why not get started on our own? We may not be able to get the same reach that Kevin Costner can get with Yellowstone, but we will be able to own the content, and we won't have the misnomer that we have farmers in Montana or ranchers in Montana that will take people and kill them at the Wyoming border, right? And so we get to control what content is in there, and we don't have some of the miscommunication that comes along with media that other people create. And so I'm really passionate about, because of the changes that have happened in paid media in general, the cost goes up every single year. The ability to capture someone's attention gets more and more difficult every single year, and the media landscape is so fragmented that I no longer have the same confidence and belief that paid media can generate the relationship that you need with a potential visitor to get them to actually book a trip. I believe that owned media that allows us to truly tell our authentic stories through a variety of formats is what's going to lead to the relationship that makes a potential visitor part of your modern community.
Yeah, I really wanted to say that outside of my job, I'm actually just a traveler, a big traveler. I go a lot of places every year. And, there's some places that I go back to over and over and over. Some of them I've been going to since like 2004 or 2005. So I just think what you're saying is so valuable from a destination perspective, because some of those relationships that you build with people, when somebody can choose to go a lot of different places, there's many, it's sort of endless options. It's like that relationship is really what makes a traveler like me keep spending the money and the time to go back and like deepen my relationship with that place. So the next question is kind of two parts that I want to ask. One is just related to what you were just saying when it comes to owned media being kind of one of the legs of the stool. What are can we just drill down a little bit more into like, what are the goals that can really be accomplished with that leg as compared to other things? Like, and really just sort of maybe clearly state, like, if you want to achieve this goal, this is going to really help you. I understand relationships, but let's just drill down a little bit onto that. And then I would love for you to talk a little bit in relationship to that. Is there a way that you're helping clients assess when they have some options, which owned media to create, and we understand what their goals are? How do you kind of help them discover where is that starting point, right? If there's a number of different things, how do we know a podcast is our best choice, or we know working on our blog more is the best choice? Is there some way that you're able to assess and evaluate that?
Yes. I will try to remember both questions, but help me out if I don't keep track. I would say the first one, what should the goals be for owned media specifically? I'm going to start with the fact that the goal for all of us is long-term sustainable visitation for our destinations and making the lives of our residents better, right? And what's interesting about owned media is if we do the storytelling correctly, that there's a level of community pride that comes along with the storytelling that we're doing. And when we get into the examples, maybe I'll call back to that statement a little bit, because there's one that it's amazing to see the community pride that's kind of coming out of that. But that's number one is I think if we're looking to generate long-term visitation and make the lives of our residents better, telling the stories in an authentic way of the destination endears us more to the audience and also endears us more to our residents and stakeholders. That's number one. The other thing is what we usually try to do with owned media is settle on a content pillar. And we talk about content pillars and slices. For example, a podcast, and podcast is the lowest barrier to entry. It's the least expensive. And that's the reason I kind of zero in on podcast, is it's the great first step into owned media, right? But with a podcast, if you think about it, let's say I'm doing 2 episodes a month, which is what North Alabama does, and we'll talk about North Alabama a little bit later. But they do these 2 episodes and they cover really valuable and interesting components of the destination. So that's the pillar. And then what we do is we slice up those pillars into dozens of different splices that we can use to power our paid, earned, and shared media. So the other reason that I love owned media is because it allows you to, if you create a pillar, it allows you, instead of being the destination that says, okay, what are we going to do our blog about this week? Which I know so many people are going through, or what email are we going to send out to the list this week? Instead, we look at the pillar that we created, and now in one podcast episode, I can have like 7 or 8 different blog posts. I can have an email nurture set up that can passively engage my audience. I can have probably a dozen or so social posts that I can slice up in either video clips if I'm doing video on the podcast, or you'll see on my LinkedIn page, if you want to go check it out, I have a mixture of both. There's some where I have a static image and the audio is playing behind the image. It's very, very simple to do. And if you're using an owned media content pillar correctly, it can power all of the other forms of media. Beaufort, I know we've got some people on the Southeast coast here. Beaufort, South Carolina, they use their podcast as a way to engage the travel writers that are coming to the destination. So if a travel writer is coming in and they know that they want to talk about a specific topic, they say, hey, you should check out these 3 podcast episodes before you come into town. The podcast is called the Intercoastal Podcast, if any of you want to check it out. They send that to those travel writers and get a much more effective article written because the travel writer was much more prepared by listening to those episodes before they come. So the goal is long-term sustainable visitation. It's building a relationship with the audience. It's endearing to your local residents and stakeholders, engaging the community pride that makes their life better. But then when done effectively, it can power all of the other forms of your marketing plan and make you incredibly efficient. And so that's the first question. Your second question, I'd love a refresher because I think I've gone so far down mentally one way that I can't remember the other
second
side.
question was just sort of related, which is, when we're looking at those being goals that we know a lot of destinations have, and that's their ultimate thing, is there a way that you all are kind of evaluating or helping them evaluate where do we take that first step? Is there,
Yes.
some way to say like, this is the low hanging fruit, so we should start here? I'm just curious about that.
Yes, and I appreciate the question. Sorry I didn't remember that. But what we do when we're bringing on a destination, and this is relatively new for us, like we are in the process of shifting our entire focus from the traditional model of destination marketing, which we were, very much involved in over the last several years. And over the last 2 years, we've been migrating to this focus on owned media. But the process that we've developed for helping destinations understand where to start, because that's one of the hardest things, is where to start, is we will go through a kind of strategy and workshop process. And at the end of that process, we know exactly what our content pillar should be, along with the slicing and distribution plan that goes along with it. It started out where we would try to, after one meeting, say, okay, here's what we think your owned media asset should be. And there's all these unanswered questions, right? And we don't have enough information yet to answer all of those questions. And so now when we do it, we don't do a long-term engagement to start. We do this audit and workshop where we actually will send a team out in person in most cases, unless budget doesn't allow for it. We'll experience the destination together. We ask all of the questions that we need to understand where the destination can not only start, but where they need to go. And then we'll build a full plan to get them there. And that's proven to be much more effective. It's been much more collaborative of an effort between us and the destinations that we work with. And I'm really excited to see the outcome of that. But if I was doing it on my own, which a lot of people are going to be trying to do, you start with your goals the same way you would if you're developing a brand strategy or a marketing strategy. What are the objectives that we're trying to accomplish? You got to answer those questions first. You've got to audit kind of the stories in the destination that are most interesting to your audience. And then you start to say, okay, well, if this is the audience and this is the story, what's the best format for us to create that? And I would definitely take into account what's the best format that's also going to allow us to version it and use it as the gasoline that powers our other types of media. Because I think efficiency is just going to be so important. And I know Angela posted at the beginning of this, and her poll results are in the chat instead of on the poll. But Angela said, we struggle with time and consistency. The way to solve that is if you can actually use it as your pillar that powers the other things. You're now trading some of the time that you were spending on other activities to work on this core asset, this core pillar, and then leverage the pillar to power everything else. And I think that's the paradigm shift that a lot of people kind of need.
Yeah, I want to say there's two things that you just said that really, just really warmed my heart. One is, that our goals across the board aren't just to attract the right visitors, but also to really lift up our communities. I think that's such a key thing that always gets me excited. But what you just said, as somebody who's been doing content marketing literally for 21 years, I think that pillar concept you're talking about is so essential. And the understanding that when you build a really strong pillar, that content pillar becomes everything else. And that can really transform your workflow into something so much more manageable. And that's just what I learned from running campaigns for many years, right? It's if I'm trying to create new content in every modality, I'm literally burnt out 2 days into that process. And sometimes the whole team, it's burning out the whole team to do that. So I really appreciate that you shared that, because I think that's something everybody can sort of think about. How do you reframe that and really think about what are those pillars that you're creating for yourself that will then make your shared media, your paid media, all of that stuff easier to generate ideas for, because you've already done the most important part of the work in that pillar. And
well, and Sarah, just real quick on that specific point that you just said, it just got so much easier because now I can take the transcript from a podcast episode or a YouTube video or something like that. I can upload it into ChatGPT and say, you make the Facebook posts, you make the email content. These are the exact deliverables that I need based on my content calendar. Spit that out for me from this episode. And of course, the human element is not going to be replaced. We need to review these and make sure it's not hallucinating, make sure it's pulling from the episode. But, it's going to shorten the time that it would have taken to build all the slices by 80%, 90%. And so there's just, not to sound accused, but there's just no excuse anymore to avoid all the versioning that can come from the pillar, because you do have the bandwidth if you'll leverage AI as well.
Yeah. Well, and I would actually even argue that you can't leverage AI if you don't have any really good owned media, because you can't just tell the AI to magically make it up out of nowhere. As a matter of fact, you would never want to do that right now. You wouldn't want to say, hey, AI, I'm going to give you control. Tell me what you know about our region and make up our social media posts. It's no, I want to feed the AI stuff that we've already done. I want to feed it the blog posts. I want to feed it, the different transcripts of things, because that's literally teaching it what we're about. So, the better website content you have, the better, video content you've been building, the better podcast content you've been building, all of that stuff to me comes together. Actually, it makes AI just even more valuable out of the gate, because again, when we ask the AI to just DIY it on its own, we're going to get any random amount of responses from them. And I wanted to say, Angela, I think thanks for sharing what you said. Angela was saying she's witnessed the power of a podcast. They have a weekly podcast on their local radio station, and she used content from that to get an article written in our state magazine here in North Carolina.
Awesome.
So that's just a perfect example of how these things kind of flow together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, because I know we had a few examples that Adam was willing to share today. And I've got the websites up. So the first one is Traveling the Spectrum.
Oh my goodness. Funny, that's the wrong URL. So let me, I'm not even sure.
If you want. I think we've got Laguna Beach up here. We've also got the North Alabama.
Yeah, let's start with Laguna Beach. And Laguna Beach is not a client of mine, and I like sharing this one because I don't want it to seem like I'm just showcasing our clients. This is one of the most brilliant owned media campaigns that I've ever seen. Those that came to the workshop at the oh, Julie, thank you, Julie. Julie put the URL in the chat. So sorry about that. So from Radical Origins, a lot of people know Laguna Beach, but they don't know a lot of the history that comes along with Laguna Beach. Laguna Beach has some really, really unique stories that have made it what it is today. And like, for example, there was a surf competition that wasn't even really an organized thing, that surfers would just come when the waves got to a certain point every year at the same time and would do a surf competition that wasn't that organized. And then over time, it became an organized surf competition, and now is one of the most important surf competitions in the world. And the story of how that came about is told through this series that's both a podcast, a YouTube series. It's kind of a multi-channel owned media campaign. And my friend Rachel O'Neill QC is the kind of the brains behind the operation, and she's just done such an incredible job of putting this together, and it's generated an incredible amount of earned media opportunities. There's been articles all over the country talking about this, and they really have nailed the storytelling within the community. If any of you want like a deeper dive on this, I did an episode with Rachel about this show on my podcast. It's several episodes back. Maybe Julie, if you wouldn't mind throwing that in the chat as well, that would be awesome. But the thing that it's done is it's really rallied the community, because the community is so proud of these stories. So not only has it gotten so much external attention, but they actually launched this in their theater, in their local theater that was downtown. And it was a rainy day, and she was worried nobody was going to show up. And even in the rain, the line was out the door and around the corner to get into this event when they premiered from Radical Origins. So such an incredible example. And I love that they've taken this owned media and they've built a landing spot on their website that really showcases this owned media very, very well. So great example. And maybe if you want a deeper dive on that, check out my full podcast episode there. Let's jump back over to travelingthespectrumshow.com, not Traveling the Spectrum. I sent you the wrong URL there. So Traveling the Spectrum Show, Myrtle Beach, which is our client that has embraced this concept of owned media more than any other destination that we've worked with. They recognized this issue that 87% of families that have children on the spectrum don't take vacations. And they had a huge desire to change that. So the first thing that they did is they got the destination autism certified. And then they created a children's book. And then they created this TV show where they brought in 3 families of kids that have kids with autism. And they gave these families unforgettable experiences in Myrtle Beach. This is some of the most incredible TV you'll ever see. And they've been working to get this content that they've created published through one of the major streaming distributors like Peacock, Netflix, Amazon Prime, all of those different places. And I think we have an announcement coming really soon that we're really excited about, that I can't really share the details on yet, but we're very, very close. So this one is going to be incredible, because when I talk about modern communities being interest-based, this is millions and millions of people that do not travel because of their situation. Myrtle Beach is showing them that they can travel. It's value to this community. But let me ask you, if these families weren't sure whether or not they could travel before, if this helps inspire them to travel, where do they know is welcoming enough and accepting enough and certified to receive them? Now, I know there's other destinations that are autism certified, but if these families watch this show, they're going to want to go to Myrtle Beach because they know they can have an amazing experience in Myrtle Beach. So it's a different way to look at our interactions with our customers. We have a very transactional view of customer relationships. Here's an ad with a pretty picture and a headline, click on it and book your trip today. When in reality, that is not relevant at all to the buying experience. We need to get involved in the way they think. And I believe that what Myrtle Beach has done here with traveling the spectrum is actually going to influence the way families that have kids with autism think, make their lives better, and help them travel, which is pretty incredible. So the mission behind this is my, you asked me a question before, what's some of my favorite, or what's my favorite project that we've been involved in? That's like choosing a favorite kid. I can't do that. But I'll say that from a mission and impact perspective, I've never been involved in anything like this. And I'm really, really proud for me and our team to be involved in it. And then the last one that I'll touch on is, because I think this is a much more attainable for a lot of smaller destinations, I wanted to include this. We actually did a great panel a couple of years ago at eTourism Summit where we had Stuart Butler and Malia Haynes, where Stuart's got one of the biggest budgets in the country at Myrtle Beach, and then Malia has a budget that's still a solid budget, but much more, I'd say, comparable to most destinations. And so this is a great example of how to leverage owned media in a smaller destination. North Alabama has settled on a podcast and really done an incredible job. And boy, if any of you want to understand the impact that it's made on their relationships with their stakeholders in the community, I would say reach out to Tammy and Malia, because it's been incredible for them to build bridges all throughout their community while also showcasing the destination and having a content pillar that they can use to slice up into a variety of different ways. So these are some of my favorite projects that we've worked on, but we've got so many of them that we love and so many in the queue that are coming that we're really excited about that are in production. This favorites list is probably going to change consistently over the next year or two.
Awesome. So I really love these examples. I do want to give a shout out to North Alabama, because when they were at the DIY tourism conference last year, we gave them an award without even realizing that y'all were involved with their podcast, just because we saw them really making an impact with what they were doing. And I wanted to celebrate that they had taken a leap into something that was definitely different for them. But it's just, really, they've done a great job, I think, of making those connections that you're talking about. We do have a question, and I'm not sure if it's Folake or Folake. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. But the question is, one thing that I'm taking away is that owned media gives an opportunity to galvanize a modern community in a deeper way. So it's about depth of connection with your audience as opposed to breadth, which maybe paid media is better for. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what you're saying, right? That the owned media is bringing a lot of depth to that. Whereas like paid media might be spreading you across a lot of things. It's also sort of like, diluting a little bit across all those channels.
Yeah, and so I actually think that's a great point and question. And I is it Falake? I'm assuming. I think that's a great question, and I'm not going to agree with you 100% on your statement at the end about paid media, and I'll tell you why. I agree that owned media in itself gives you, okay, Falake. Okay, great. Owned media gives you a much smaller reach on its own. But a lot of us have looked at paid media, I would say, in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is the marketing funnel has fundamentally changed based on consumer behavior. We used to look at it as awareness, consideration, and purchase. Those were the three steps to getting a transaction. I think it's changed in that we look at it as a three C's: content, then community, then commerce. And when you ask for commerce, when someone is not a part of your community, the chances of converting that lead go way down. And so the way I look at paid media is what we should actually be doing is promoting content, using paid media not to run ads, but to promote content. So put paid media behind a 30-second clip of your YouTube show or podcast or whatever your owned media asset is, or even promoting a blog post if you don't have those kind of assets. Put money behind something that provides value and gets the audience to engage with you in some way. The first step is engagement. The first step is not, the first step is awareness. The second step is engagement. It's no longer consideration. We're asking too much too early. And so I would say paid media gives us the ability to get more breadth. And Falake, I think that's exactly right. But I think the way we're using paid media is like throwing money in a garbage can, that we need to, instead of running transactional ads that don't demonstrate any value or desire to create a relationship with the visitor, we just want your money. Instead, we need to ask them to engage with content that provides value, use those slices and use paid media to promote those slices, and then invite them to be part of our community. And once we do that, we have the ability to influence commerce. But I don't believe that any longer you can influence commerce without first having a community.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you for adding that point in, because I think, that's something where I feel like I'm just talking to a lot of people all the time about, hey, especially when we're doing paid media, it's like, look, we do want to advertise to people, but nobody is going to purchase the first time they see the ad. They don't even know anything about you. And especially living in the United States, I'm like, you do realize in our culture, everything around us is asking for our money. Like, and I mean, I'm 48, but the younger generations, the digital natives, they've grown up in a world where literally everything they're interfacing with is asking them for money. So we've almost got like the opposite thing we've developed here, which I think is causing what you're talking about, right? Like that sort of constant barrage of information and requests and, hey, take this, buy this, get this, do this. That sort of influx of information now has really created, I think, whole generations of people where we just start with no. We start with the answer being no. And so we have to actually feel something about it. We have to feel connected to it. We have to feel related. It has to be something that's like relevant to who we are. As an SEO person, this is a conversation I've had a lot, because 20 years ago when I started, relevancy mattered. And I'm like, man, relevancy now is like an entirely different animal than it was in, let's say, 2004. Right? Because it's just the literal number of options I have makes relevancy almost like a totally different thing than it used to be. So again, I want to remind everybody, we've got a few minutes left. We've got about 10 minutes. I want everyone to pop their questions into the Q&A if they have them. But I have a few questions that I know people wanted me to ask Adam today. And so I want to make sure that we go through those. And again, maybe you can sort of more rapid fire answer these if you like, Adam, so you don't have to feel like you got to dig too deep. But I think I want to reverse a couple of the questions that we were going to put at the end and talk about them while we have some time. One is, I've been talking to a lot of people about first party data over the last couple of years, especially destinations, how important it is that we really think about those strategies, right? That we're not going to be, as cookies go away, and how we're able to track people changes and whether people can tell their phones, I don't want to pass my information along, that we really have to think of fun and interesting ways to really build a relationship with people. And then they will give us the data that we need to learn more about who our visitors are, or, whatever it is that we're looking to kind of quantify. I'm curious the relationship that you see between owned media and first party data and how those things are connected, because I see that there's some opportunity there to move the dial on both of those things.
Yes, and this is why when I communicate about owned media, when I communicate about it in relation to paid media, that's when you really start to see the difference and the power of it, because paid media, the cost is going up and your access to the people that you are reaching through that paid media is going down. So value going down, cost going up, and yet we're still using it in the same way. Whereas if I'm building a community, those community members will gladly give me their information because they want to hear from me, because I've built a relationship with them. And probably the most underutilized asset for tourism destinations around the world that I've ever seen is specifically email. Because if someone gives you their email address, they are actively giving you permission to market to them. And if you have a good CRM, you can actually monitor their interaction with your website and send them the correct information based on their interest in your website. And so I think email is something that really, really needs to be a focus for every destination, because no matter the size of your community, if you have a marketing budget of $15,000 a year, well, email is an owned media asset that will give you long-term access to a sustainable audience over time. So instead of running paid media using 80% of your budget and only having $3,000 left to work with paid media, I would focus on building email lists that allow me to communicate with this audience more than once, right? And so to your point, first party data, I think the best vehicle for first party data long term will be owned media and its ability to build communities long term.
Yeah, and it's so funny. I love also hearing you say email, because I'm always telling people, they'll focus so much on social media and some of the other things that are really popular and trendy. And a lot of times I'm like, don't forget about the email list. And people are like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
email, does it still matter? And I'm like, yes, big time. It still matters. That's really a direct route to somebody in a lot of ways. It's mostly like the most inner way that you're kind of contacting them is through that email.
Well, an email matters if you have built a relationship because they want your content. Email doesn't matter if you're just spamming a list with the topic of the month.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Important distinction. So again, I know we've got a few more minutes just in case anyone wants to pop a final question in there, but I do want to, I want to make 2 points. One, thank you for sharing the examples that you shared, because not only do I think they're great examples of owned media, but they're great examples of integrating that owned media into your website and really utilizing your website as kind of that home base, that place that people can come and really engage with the community, with what your destination is about, with your values, and with the things that make your community special. So I think like that's a really key thing to see in a lot of those examples is how well, especially the Radical Origins, like I love the work they've done to brand it, to really put it in to the website to make it kind of an experience. But I'm wondering if you could give us kind of a 1 or 2 minute overview of what does the future hold? What are some things you see coming down the pipeline? AI is changing a lot of stuff. There's lots of other things going on. Is there anything in the owned media space that people could be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at the future, and the prediction business is always a hard business to be in, but I will give you exactly what I believe. I don't believe that in 5 years, even paid media will be above 40% of destination budgets. I believe that destinations are going to lose their funding if they cannot demonstrate a responsible use of the money that's coming through tax dollars. And right now, with the way paid media's value is decreasing, and an example that I shared when I did the keynote in North Carolina was that in fourth quarter of 2022, Salesforce is one of the largest companies in the world, and they publish, because they're a public company, they have to publish their metrics. Their cost to acquire a customer went up by 75% in fourth quarter of 2022. And they have the luxury of knowing that, at least. But because we can't tie the ad spend directly to the booking, we don't know what our cost to acquire a customer has done. And which, it's a luxury on one hand, but I'm sorry, that's going to come to light at some point. And there's going to be a lot of organizations and people that are exposed for doing it how we've always done it, because that's the way we've always done it. And so I think it's time for everybody to take a really close look at our marketing budgets and look at it like a sustainable asset. Just like we need our products to be sustainable, we need our economy to be sustainable, and then we just throw our marketing budget out the door using paid media, even though the effectiveness of it has gone down. And so when I make a prediction for the future, the combination of what I just said, along with consumer buying habits, and why the drink Prime that was launched by the Paul brothers, who created a community and then launched this product to their community, Prime overtook Gatorade in Walmart within 3 years of launch. That's unbelievable. But the incumbent, Gatorade, has been using the traditional methods for 30 years And now this newcomer using this content community commerce method has unseated the incumbent. And it's happened because the combination of the value of paid media and consumer buying habits have come together to make authentic storytelling through owned media your best chance at long-term success. And then you layer on first-party data. I have a hard time imagining that we're going to be able to continue using 80% of our budget on paid media and actually keep our jobs or our funding.
Yeah, and I mean, I really appreciate you being really direct about that, because I think that's a change that I'm seeing as well. And Angela, she's curious if you agree with this statement: quality content with quality audience is the game changer, right?
100%. And it's so important. Like, don't just choose content because you like it. Who do you want to come? And in fact, if you really want another deep dive on this, listen to my most recent episode with Play Golf Myrtle Beach, because they had this exact dilemma. Do we go with the audience that's always been coming here, or do we use owned media to create a new pipeline? And they used it to target the audience they want to come, not the audience that's already coming. So you combine great content with a quality audience who you know you need to target and have a chance with. That's really the sweet spot.
All right, well, look, Adam, everybody told me that I need to talk to you more. They are 100% correct. I really appreciate you today. This conversation just makes me feel like I know what I'm talking about. It's really nice when
You
other
do.
experts in the industry are really able to kind of step in and just say, like, yes, I'm seeing what you're seeing. And even looking at the future, I'm really seeing exactly what you said. We've been very wasteful with budgets over the years, just across the board. That's not a destination issue. That's like an issue in marketing all around. And I think we're really having to ask some hard questions right now. And I think, moving forward into the future, there's going to be a lot of things changing. What's going on in our cities and towns and destinations is going to be changing. There's lots of different challenges there. I think we've got two younger generations that are digital natives that are really different in the way they behave and how they think about things. So I really appreciate your time today. To all of you, I will be sharing the recording as well as the slide deck. You'll have Adam's email as well as his LinkedIn, and of course, all of my contact information. You can reach out to me anytime with any additional questions. But again, we really appreciate you being here today, Adam, and sharing your expertise. I'll also pull some of these links from the chat so you can go back and listen to the Destination Marketing Podcast episodes that were mentioned. Again, if you're not listening to that podcast, I definitely suggest it. It's something that I think has really opened my eyes to just, instead of sitting alone trying to generate ideas, I'll turn on the podcast to listen to some episodes I haven't heard yet. And it really just is great to see what other communities and destinations are doing. So thank you all so much for joining us. And yeah, I hope to see you next month at the next digital drop-in. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.